Hello again, everyone. It's Mr. Most Days Off.
And I'm the WizKid.
And we're here to talk about PopThreads.com, our newest sponsor and your online destination for all pop culture t-shirts. And right now, for our listeners, they are offering 10% off just by using the discount code Simpsons at checkout.
Woohoo!
They have some awesome Simpsons shirts. They've also got other things like old school Nickelodeon, my favorite, Legends of the Hidden Temple, and they've got us wrestling fans covered.
They also have up to the current season t-shirts from TV shows like Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead. So make sure you head over to popthreads.com right now.
Use that discount code Simpsons
so you can save a lot of dope!
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and I am back once again to talk about The Simpsons. Today we got a couple more classics to go over with Old Money, where Grandpa's new girlfriend dies and leaves him a fortune, followed by Brush with Greatness, where even Marge has a hard time finding Mr. Burns' inner beauty. Before we get too far into that, as always, let me introduce you to your co-host with the most, Richie the WizKid. How are you today, Rich?
Fine and dandy like sour candy, just like usual. I was not necessarily looking forward to these two episodes before we started, but as usual, you can always find some charm in the earlier Simpsons episodes that you didn't quite catch the first time. But I'm sure we will be getting into that here in a second. They're not the best, but they're still good. I'm going to throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the Mount Splashmore. It is Miles.
You know, actually, speaking of Mount Splashmore, that's something that I had completely forgotten that was the, front end of this episode. So I was actually really excited when we got to that part. Just because, like you, I think the issue is these are fine episodes. It's just we've had such good, high-end, top-of-the-season episodes here recently that eventually, you know, it can't ride its peak forever. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's going to ebb and flow a little bit. And again, these two are very enjoyable. But that Mount Splashmore gimmick, man, there's a lot of stuff there I'm excited to talk about.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that part too. When it first started, all of a sudden, my memory just started exploding with all the little parts that I knew were coming up that I'd forgotten about.
Exactly. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about Old Money, which debuted on March 28th, 1991. It had the chalkboard gag, I will not grease the monkey bars, which I swear I've seen that in a movie, and I can't remember what one, but, I know that it's, I wanted to say Home Alone, but I don't think that's right, but maybe it's, one of the sequels, and the bad guy, is chasing the kid and slips on grease monkey bar. I just thought that was funny, regardless. We have a very appropriate couch gag as well, with the Simpsons all getting home to see Grandpa Simpson sleeping on the couch and blocking their way. Also, we get the first appearance of Professor Frink in this episode. So, we open on this episode with the Simpsons family dropping off Abe Simpson, or Grandpa Simpson, at the retirement center, the retirement castle, where the elderly can hide from the inevitable.
And I like here, right off the bat, where they're doing a gimmick about where they just went on their family trip with Grandpa. And it's none other place than the liquor store. And all Grandpa got was a piece of beef jerky.
Gee, thanks for this jerky.
And I love the tie-in later in the episode where he opens the top drawer in his room and it's full of jerky.
It's like all they ever do.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. That was hilarious. And again, it shows those little jokes they throw in there where you have to pay attention or you don't notice them.
Absolutely. And then there's some more obvious jokes here when they start debating on what Grandpa smells like. And I really enjoy when, Homer originally kind of cuts Bart and Lisa off as if he was going to, reprimand them for being rude. And he's like, he smells just like any other regular old man. Kind of like a hallway in a hospital. And then Marge really does get upset with them.
Yeah, it's mostly true.
This is also really funny because Homer points out that they should be thoughtful of the fact that one day they'll be old. And they should maybe set a better example for how to treat Grandpa. And Homer actually kind of has a freak out moment where you can tell it's literally the first time he ever realized that he would one day get old. It's like a small child starting to understand the concept of mortality rather.
You know, I just love how he's playing on his emotions and asking the kids if they'd ever put him in a retirement home, and he's so terrified of it.
Exactly. So, they decide that from now on, the third Sunday of every month isn't just going to be a trip to the liquor store. No, it's going to be a fun family day. And they start debating what they're going to do. And it's about that time that they drive by a billboard for Discount Lion Safari, which I thought this was kind of interesting. This is actually based on writer Jay Cogan's real-life visits to the drive-through county safari in Loxahatchee, Florida as a kid, and he just wanted to kind of write that into the show as a memory of his.
I bet there's a lot of fun stuff you can see in a safari-type setting down in Florida.
Well, there's one not too far from us here in North Texas. Have you ever? I cannot think of what it's called, but it's like a drive-through zoo essentially. But they've got they don't have it where like the lions can come directly up to you, but they do have it where like there are lions in like a secluded area, and like giraffes and ostrich and a bunch of other animals that are less dangerous can actually come directly up to your window.
Yeah, when I was a kid, my great aunt and uncle used to take me to that. I think more than once out in Weatherford.
Mm-hmm.
And they have
it's actually a lot of fun.
They have like the big cups of feed you can get where you can feed the animals basically.
Yeah, I always thought that was a fun concept, so I'm kind of with the Simpsons here that I would too be excited about the drive-through safari. But before we get back to our next visit with Grandpa, we actually follow Grandpa back to the retirement home where he's frustrated that they've given him the wrong pills, and they just basically, when he complains, they just threaten that they're going to get the nurse to sedate him, more or less. And they aren't. You can tell that they're not really listening to him.
And then you get the most romantic story that's ever been created before happening now.
That's right. Abe meets B. Simmons. And B is actually played by Audrey Meadows, who was born in 1922 and lived till 1996. She's best known for the role of Alice Cramden from The Honeymooners, which a lot of people are going to know. It's the old Jackie Gleason show, and it's most common that she was on the receiving end of "One of These Days, Alice, bang, zoom, straight to the moon," which is fun to think about a time when we were a lot more open about domestic violence.
I'm sorry I'm laughing, but sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, totally. It's awful, but it's hilarious because that used to just basically come through the television like all the time, where this dude would just basically be like, "Bitch, shut up, or I'm gonna smack you," and that's like really more or less what he was saying to his wife on a common occurrence. But anyway, Audrey Meadows was a very sweet woman, according to all of the staff at The Simpsons, and they absolutely loved having her on the show. And she just she came at it with a sense of eagerness and was a delight to be on the show. So I thought that was really cool. And again, just somebody so iconic in her time, making one last iconic appearance before she passed away.
Yeah, I mean, this was within 5 years of her passing. This must have been one of the last things she did.
It was. It's not the last, but it was very short on her list. There's not many things after this that she does on her IMDb page. One other interesting thing about Audrey Meadows' character of B is an anagram for Abe, which was just kind of a small thing, but I thought it was worth noting.
That's cute. That's cute.
It is, isn't it? We get into our seductive pill eating scene, which is absolutely hilarious. Apparently, it's a reference to the movie Tom Jones, which I'm not familiar with, but even not knowing that before reading it after the fact, I still really enjoyed this scene. And actually, I watched this episode while my wife was home, and she just happened to walk through the room for this one part, and she started cracking up too. It just kind of shows the impactfulness of this joke.
The part that got me was right after this when they talk about their situations where they're basically figuring out that they're both single, is that Grandpa says that he's widowed. And I don't remember at all the context before this episode on whether he's actually thinks that Mona Simpson is dead or if he just refuses to acknowledge her existence at this point.
Oh, it's an interesting point. I didn't think about the fact that we will see Mona come back in the future. So that's a very, very good point. I wonder if they're going to explain that or not. We'll have to look into that. I actually really enjoyed the part where Grandpa was kind of fishing to see what her situation was, and he's like, "Well, do you have plans tonight?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to be sitting alone in my room." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, if you have plans, then I'll leave you alone." Oh, and then it's he gets really awkward again, and it's like, geez, I thought this would get easier with age.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they get all spruced up with their pomade and their fancy dresses, and they go out dancing and dating, and they go for a nice slow walk on the beach. So slow that a turtle actually passes them during that
it was
scene.
a tortoise, too. That's even worse, man. Like, that tortoise is Holland compared to them.
But Bee's birthday is coming up, and Grandpa Simpson wants to get her something nice. So he goes to the only store he knows, Herman's discount military surplus store, and he just isn't finding what he's looking for. He does find Napoleon's non-famous hat, but feels that Herman is asking way too much money for it. So he hops on over to Grandma's World instead, which my first thought was, like, if you knew there was a store called Grandma's World, I feel like you would have been better off starting there. But it did kind of set something up for the end of the episode, or for later in the episode, so I get why they went here.
Well, you don't know that she's actually a grandma. Does she say she has kids at all?
You know, she doesn't, but honestly, I feel like kids or no kids, like, you're still going to be in that age demographic of enjoyable things. And that's not to say that all old people have to enjoy grandmotherly things, because, like, if you're a grandma and you like skydiving or paintball, fucking good for you. I'd be happy to do either of those activities with you, but you're going to find a lot more elderly women who are interested in knitting, sewing, cross-stitch, quilting, etc. And that's not me being ageist or sexist, that's just stating the facts, statistics. Again, you can do whatever you want to do, it's just that most people are going to fall into that category.
Well, she does have one glass eye, so that can make some of that stuff a little more difficult. And let's be honest, man, that Napoleon fez, it was from 96, and that was just before he defeated the Sardinians, so I mean, come on now.
Didn't they actually control Elm Street on Springfield at one point?
I think you're right, yeah. I think
Back in Bart the General, I think that they said that. That's so funny. So it's Bee's birthday, and Grandpa is excited as hell to go spend the day with his girlfriend, and just about now is when Homer shows up to remind Grandpa that it is now the third Sunday of the month, and they are ready to go take him somewhere special. Grandpa starts complaining that he wants to spend the day with his girlfriend, and there's a funny moment where here it's kind of douchey but really hilarious, where Homer's just like, "Oh, your girlfriend," and he starts talking to the empty chair, saying like, "Oh, well, there's plenty of room for your girlfriend. Hell, you can bring all your friends along," and he just starts acting like a total asshole. But like, it's so Homer.
My thing is, Grandpa's never once acted like he sees people that aren't there. Like, he's acted weird and a little loopy already at times, but like, if this is the first time that your father was saying something like that where you thought, oh my god, he's imagining people, I would be a little more alarmed if I actually thought he saw people.
Yeah, I could say that too. I mean, yeah, they definitely play up the idea that he might be a little bit senile, but like, that's a full-on hallucination at that point. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
But regardless of Grandpa's will, they pack him up in the car and load him up to the drive-through safari, where if you can find a cheaper lion, you must be in Africa. So I love this scene here where basically Homer is annoyed that all the animals are sleeping and everybody's kind of bored, and he's like, they can sleep on their own time. And he starts driving through the spots that he shouldn't be, like through the do not enter zones, and honking his horn to stir some activity.
Once again, Homer always has to take the quote-unquote shortcut. He always takes the road less traveled, which I guess is a great analogy, or a great metaphor for The Simpsons. Is Homer is the man that always takes the road less traveled.
And often it's not the correct choice. A lot of times it's not the road less traveled because, like, there's a real good fucking reason it's not traveled.
That's what I mean, though. That's what,
yeah.
Most people do the right thing and take the right path and make all the right choices, but Homer always takes the longest route. Well, I guess there's the way that Homer says it. There's the right way, the wrong way, and the Homer way. And they say, isn't the Homer way the wrong way? Yeah,
yes,
but faster. Always love that quote.
That's a great line, for sure.
Such a good metaphor for the show.
Definitely. But Homer gets the car stuck in heavy lion territory, and I love when everyone's like, Bart, get out and push.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up. I also really like, they kind of do a time slip here, and Grandpa's been visibly and audibly annoyed the entire time, just basically saying he wants to get back to his girlfriend. He doesn't want to be here, and sure enough, they get him stuck, and they actually end up stuck there overnight. And there's another great moment where when they first arrived, one of the only rules was don't make eye contact with the lions, and sure enough, at daylight, Bart is just staring eye to eye into the lion. Which was brilliant. And then we get a guy coming through the woods and saying, Mr. Simpson, I presume.
Which I didn't see him take names at the beginning, but I guess it works out. Okay.
I guess you could say it's just Homer's reputation.
That is very true.
Finally, Abe gets back to the retirement center. He's already missed Bee's birthday, but he's excited to get to her. He runs up saying, I've got a date with an angel. And his good buddy Jasper says, you don't know how right you are, Abe.
Which is kind of fucked up.
It is kind of fucked up, man. But we've talked about it in the last episode. Jasper isn't exactly the nicest dude. I mean, he's kind of, he says shit pretty straight and not very sugar-coated very often.
When you're older, a lot of times I hear that you stop giving two shits about what other people think about you and catering to other people, and you just kind of say what you feel, so.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to embrace that now.
Good idea.
Unfortunately, Bee's heart burst, or specifically her ventricle burst. Her ticker gave out, and I love when Abe is like, yeah, they might say her ventricle burst, but I know she died of a broken heart.
Which, pretty much that's exactly what happened, so yeah.
Yeah, it's sad, but it's true. It's also funny when Abe says he knows that she really loved him because she didn't make him a pallbearer.
I forgot about that one. Yeah, that was... Which one of the guys up front kind of looked like Hans Mole Man, but like a different shade of Mole Man. So I was like, oh, how many guys was she involved with in the past?
Well, Grandpa's not taking it so well, and when we flash into his room, he's reading, I believe it was a letter from Bee, and it seems like he's just crying his eyes out, but it turns out it's actually just a leaky roof in his shitty retirement home. And none other than Lionel Hutz shows up, the lawyer voiced by Phil Hartman, and he lets Grandpa know that he's going to inherit Bee's money, $106,000, and all he has to do is stay the night in a haunted house. Just kidding.
The thing that got me about this is if Bee actually was incredibly wealthy, which, let's be honest, $106,000 isn't that much money in today's standards. Even back then...
Back then it was pretty good, dude. I wouldn't turn my eye at $100,000.
I never
could do
would.
a lot with that.
Like, I'm like Mr. Burns in this episode. I'll never.
I was to say, if it's ever worth not groveling for, then I don't want to know where our society is gone.
But I'm just saying, like, it's not an excess of wealth is what I'm going for here. But if you were described to the town as wealthy, the last lawyer I would have on my docket is Lionel Hutz. Like, that is not a good choice unless she was just that much of a penny pincher that she knew that was the best way to save more money in the long run, which I can argue against that, though.
He does do wills, as he points out to Abe before leaving, so maybe she was thinking ahead for him.
That's just awful.
That's pretty much. But yeah, speaking of awful, the manager of the retirement center, fucking awful dude. Awful dude. He lets Grandpa know that the retirement center doesn't have to be the same for people with money. Like, you get a better rub down, for instance. And it was a funny moment, but it was also just so sad because, unfortunately, this is something that really does happen with our elderly. We just don't do a good enough job of, like, taking care of them. And far too many people find themselves living in these types of conditions as opposed to being actually taken care of like a human being. Very sad.
Or even, like, in other cultures where everyone respects and honors the elderly and they have such a higher standing within the family, even. Like, it's crazy to just think about it. But in this episode in particular, they've put these little things throughout the entire episode where you see just how shitty the retirement home is, and that plays into how the episode ends, obviously. So, like, I feel like, yeah, you're right. You feel kind of weird about it, especially looking back as being a little older and knowing how things work out in real life. You feel bad, but like in the context of the episode, I see why they did what they did here.
I agree. Grandpa actually makes a comment to this manager saying, don't you feel like all people deserve to be treated nicely and not just the wealthy? And the manager is like, yeah, but it passes. Again, a funny joke about a terrible circumstance. So Grandpa's got a ton of money. He's got $106,000, and Bee wants him to do what will make him happy. He's written Homer out of his life at this point because he's so furious with him for making him miss his girlfriend's birthday. So he just starts going and doing things and he buys that fez, that Napoleon's fez we talked about. There's a great moment where Herman, he leaves his hat on the counter and Herman immediately puts it out in the window as the hat McKinley was shot in.
Yeah, that made me laugh a lot.
Probably, again, sad but true circumstance of what really goes down. In addition to buying that hat, he's also just going and doing things. He goes to the mud hole where he's just not happy watching mud wrestlers. He goes parasailing where he's just not happy parasailing. He goes to Disneyland that is not affiliated with Disneyland, Disney World, or any of the Disney company. And he's on a roller coaster and just looks bored and sad. And the ghost of B shows up, or at least in his mind. It's not entirely clear. B claims to be haunting a family in Texas.
So there you go. It's real.
So this is actually, interestingly enough, the very first time we ever learn Grandpa's first full name of Abraham. And there's kind of an interesting story to this with Matt Groening, because a lot of you probably know that Matt Groening named The Simpsons after his own family, but he replaced himself with Bart, and Bart was just an anagram of Bratz. But for whatever reason, Matt Groening did not want to name Grandpa Simpson after his own grandfather. So he left it up to the writers. And the writers came up with Abraham J. Simpson. But what's interesting, I thought, is in real life, coincidentally, Matt Groening's grandfather is named Abram. So it was very, very close.
That's kind of like crazy. I wonder if the writers actually knew about that beforehand, or if they came up with it and then like Matt Groening was just like, what the hell?
Yeah, it did not specify, but I got the impression that like Matt Groening did not tell them that his father, like they did not have that knowledge, and it was just by pure chance.
It'd be too assholeish if like they knew it was Abram and they were like, we're just gonna slightly change one letter.
Totally. But yeah, so while he's got the ghost of B, he asks her a few things, and she's like, dude, you're not happy. Why don't you go around and spread that money around and make other people as happy as you made me, and see your son. And Abraham had only one other question, and that was, what's death like? To which B replied, not as scary as this, as they toppled over the end of the roller coaster.
And a reason I will throw out there, just because you brought up that, like, obviously from the way you were talking, you think this is all in Grandpa's head. I'm going to take the other side on this. I don't think Grandpa Simpson has it in him to show the kind of love and support that he gets from B in this moment. When she says, to make other people as happy as you made me, Grandpa is a Simpson, and they're typically angry, or they don't really know how to express happiness, or if they get happiness, it's very fleeting like it is for him in this episode. But for her to say, make other people as happy as you made me, I think it's a real poignant moment for him right here, and especially when she says, and go talk to your son, because Homer and Grandpa have been fighting ever since B died, because Grandpa blames Homer for it. So I know he says that he misses his son, and he like breaks down for a second there, but I don't think it's just him talking in his head in this moment. Because in the cartoon world, when you see ghosts, unless it's clear that it's some kind of dream, it usually is an actual ghost. So that's what I'm going with in this.
Fair enough. I think that either way it makes the same point, but I understand your consideration that Grandpa might not be emotionally capable of that range. I could see that.
Or it could be that because he never says it on the outside, that's exactly how he feels on the inside. So, I mean, like you said, I could really argue it either way if I wanted to.
Sure. Debate class is fun. Well, anyway, we get back to...
You want to see my rebuttal?
Always. We get back to the Simpsons' home, where Homer is visibly depressed over the relationship situation with his father, and just then, Grandpa himself shows up and busts down the door and says, "Is there room for your table for a foolish old man who, basically shouldn't have been holding this grudge against you?" And Homer is like, well, yeah, we'll have to move a chair from the den, but it's no problem. But you can tell there's like a moment of hesitation while he considers the fact that they're going to have to move the chair from the den.
Lazy old Homer J. And that's why he gets Bart to do it.
I like that right after Abe tells the Simpson clan about the money situation, Bart immediately pipes up that, why don't you give the money to us, Grandpa? And Homer is like, oh, shush. That's just the jubilance of a young boy who doesn't know any better. But then immediately after is like, but there is some wisdom in his innocence.
That's what you get with the kids in this moment, is Bart thinking about desire and Lisa representing the logic in this moment.
Yeah, and we'll get to a great Lisa bit here shortly. But Grandpa Simpson decides that he's gonna give his money away, and he just wants to hear somebody who has a good cause. So he announces that he'll be interviewing people, and they're lined up in the streets. Kent Brockman is actually doing an expose on it, which is kind of fun. Or not a report, not an expose. That sounded weird, but he's reporting on this line, and he's kind of like going through and seeing all the people. I think some of the people that we saw included Darth Vader and the Joker from Batman.
The Joker was really cool. I did not remember that, but seeing Joker in Simpson form was fantastic.
Yeah, that was cool. And there's actually another Joker reference in the next episode, which is kind of weird that once again, back-to-back episodes have that reference, but I guess, possibly just the crew is the same at that point, so it kind of makes sense. Regardless, I really like that that Kent Brockman himself actually gets in line after he gets done going down, and he's basically, for what this reporter, I'll be trying to talk my way into this money, is more or less what he says. Otto's the first to pitch his idea to Grandpa. He wants a bitchin' bus complete with a cobra wrapped around a naked lady. This is what we alluded to earlier, where Burns actually asked for the money, and he basically is asked, like, aren't you, like, rich as hell? And he's like, well, the day that $100,000 isn't worth groveling over is a day that I don't want to be here, or something of that nature. Basically, $100,000 is worth groveling over, even if you're rich like him.
I want to talk about that exchange with Grandpa and Burns for just a second. The two of these characters, as we will come to know over the years ahead of us, they have a very in-depth history together in the past. They served in the military together.
When we get to the Hellfish episode, there's a ton of connection with these two.
Yeah. They act like they don't even know each other in this scene, which again, I know it's only season 2, but I'm just saying I like to talk about continuity and things that you don't quite notice or think about. And it was just kind of odd to see them not recognizing each other, or not at least alluding to the fact that they actually know each other very well.
Yeah, that is very interesting, you're right. And I also noted that their relationship is very ambiguous at this point in time. And we know, again, that Hellfish episode in particular, but I believe there's others that are going to connect these two in the Simpsons U, if you will.
Absolutely. I just love that. I love that Grandpa Simpson has Hitler in his sights in that episode, and Burns hits him with something, and it makes him miss.
Yeah. Mo is actually really funny here too, and he wants to basically somebody who he thinks could possibly be a treasure hunter left a map in his bar that he wants to pursue. Of course, it could also just be directions to some guy's house, but he wants to spend a lot of money, and one of the things that was included on his list was a 2-man diving bell. And sadly, Grandpa is like, that sounds crazy, but so far you're my front runner.
I wanted to I made a note at this part. I know you don't watch recent episodes of The Simpsons, but sometime within the last, 8 or 9 years, there has been an episode where Mo has a treasure map from his bar, and I think it's when the brief time he's with Mrs. K, and he's trying to do a treasure hunt, and the Simpsons actually get lost in like a underground cave, I think, and Lisa's telling stories about revenge or something. I might be mixing 2 episodes up, but it's literally everyone's trying to find this treasure from a map that Mo had in his bar. So this comes into play like decades after this episode, basically.
Well, in about 7 years, if my math is correct, we should be getting to that episode to review. So I'm excited to see that.
Mark it down in your calendars today. We need a statistician.
Yeah, for sure.
Send your resumes to @MrMostDaysOff.
There you go. I'll look into that immediately. Who else we got here? We got Dr. Monroe proposing his version of the Skinner box, the Monroe box, but it's the box he doesn't need money for. He just needs money to buy the child to raise till they're 30. And then we get the first appearance, or actually we get Bart next, and Bart just wants a bunch of like guns and blow guns and things of that nature, silly stuff mostly. But then we get our first appearance of Professor Frink, voiced by none other than Hank Azaria. And what's interesting about this is that originally this character was actually written to be more mad scientist, which is kind of why he's talking about this like death ray in this episode. But when Hank Azaria did the voice, it just kind of came out as Jerry Lewis's nutty professor, so they just went with it.
Oh man, I love Professor Frink over the years. He has some of the best little nuances to him with the Glavins and the Hoys and all that. Like, it's just, he's so funny. And the older the show gets, the more you love Hank Azaria. When he has more and more people.
Oh God,
like
he has so many great characters.
People don't even talk about how racist it is that he does the voice of Apu. I've heard like one story where people complained about that, but it's like when you hear Apu's voice.
But those people are wrong.
Yeah, when you hear Apu's voice, you're like, I don't care who does the voice. That's Apu's voice, and you don't even think about it now. And it's just he has so many great characters throughout the years.
Totally.
I think he does Dr. Nick too, if I remember correctly.
I think that's right. I'd have to look, but I do believe that is correct. He does so many. I think out of all the character actors, I think he has the most on the show, if I'm not mistaken.
And I remember I read a story once about how young he was when the show started, and I mean he's been able to base. I mean he's done a lot of other things. He's been in a lot of movies and such, but he's been able to keep this steady job for 28 years. Like that's incredible. It's been paying his bills his entire life.
Oh, dude, I absolutely love him in that movie. I'm trying to think of which one it is, but he plays the scuba instructor. He's like, "Are you for scuba?"
Oh, Along Came Polly.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. I love that. That's not even that great of a movie, but he's really great in it. Anyway, Lisa is last, and she basically tells Grandpa that the people that really need this money are the poor and the downstricken, the ones that don't have roofs over their head or a meal to eat. Or you could just get me a pony, and I would name it Princess, and I would ride it every day.
What was Grandpa's response there? I forgot what he said. He's like, "You're right," and she gets like that look in her eyes, like she thinks she's gonna get a pony for a second.
Oh yeah, that's actually what it is. That's at the point where she's like, "Oh, if you get me a pony, I'll name it Princess, and I'll ride it every day." And then he's like, "Oh no, not about that. I'm talking about the people that really need the money."
Well,
and she's like, "Oh." You can tell she's like happy that Grandpa is doing it, but like she's still an 8-year-old girl, and that's what's brilliant about this.
What I like though is the point she stressed to him is that the people that need this money most can't come stand in line to talk to you about it, and that you actually have to get up and go out to the streets to see who needs the money the most. Like that's what I thought, because the whole episode up to this point was about people coming to him to see how to spend it. But like I like this little turn at the end where she gets him to go out to look for it. It's basically get off your ass and stop being so lazy is what it is, but with smarter and more intelligent wording.
Yeah. Well, unintelligently, Grandpa decides that he needs more money to help everyone, so he's going to take it to the casino and try to double or even triple his money. Homer actually hears about this, and in rare Homer fashion is the voice of reason, trying to rush to his grandfather at the casino to stop him from betting it all away. Of course, he does have time to stop at Krusty Burger along the way.
That was a great little moment. I need a double Krusty Burger to go, hurry, or whatever he says. And you can't understand the drive-thru guy when he's reading the order back. It just sounds like...
It sounds like every drive-thru that you ever go to.
What I liked is that Otto was the bus driver driving the old people to the casino.
Yeah, does he just drive every bus in Springfield? I thought that, like, school bus drivers kind of just exclusively did that. Maybe it's like a part-time gig on the side.
Well, I just wanted to bring up the fact that they were all complaining about the ride when Otto literally was trying to get money to make a much better bus in a previous scene.
Well, they were all complaining that he was going too fast, though, and he wanted to make a bus that was going to go faster.
And didn't he say he was going to threaten to jam them into the river or something?
Yeah, they're all like, "Slow down, you'll kill us. Slow down, you maniac." And he's like, "Shut up, or I'll drive into a river."
I don't know why, I just really liked that moment.
I did too. I like Otto a lot. He cracks me up.
I know why you like Otto.
It's for his asthma medication. Anyway, I really like this next scene. Homer basically dives into the roulette table trying to prevent Grandpa from betting all of his money away. Grandpa's trying to bet on the number 41, which doesn't even exist on the roulette table, but he has a really good feeling about it. But he decides to go with 36 instead, since that actually is a legal bet. Oh, right before this, too, Grandpa actually recited the poem If by Rudyard Kipling, which ends with, at the end of a bunch of stuff, "You'll be a man then." And Homer is like, "No, you'll be a bonehead then." Which actually, again, I kind of thought it was interesting that Homer was actually the voice of reason here.
Yeah, and I don't know. I still feel like it's somewhat selfishly done. I still feel like he's just trying to protect this money because he thinks there's still an outside chance he might get some of it. But, I mean, he still did the right thing.
Yeah. And he did make his father feel for the first time in his entire life that he was glad that he had kids because he saved him all that money.
Yeah, basically Homer grabs the chips and doesn't let Grandpa put them on the table, and it ends up being double zeros, which would have been a hell of a bet. But as we see, he saves Grandpa from losing all that money.
Yeah, that's insane to bet all on one number. I mean, that's just not going to happen. But they ask Grandpa if he decided what he's going to do with his money. He kind of sees the bus full of old people getting back on their bus to go back home, and he decides, you know what, he's going to invest it in his own retirement center. It flashes to 6 months later, and things that we saw earlier that were broken, like the walls, are now nice. The cue ball for the pool table is now actually entirely round and not broken in half. Everybody had their own nice recliner, and probably the coup de grace of the whole thing was the opening of the Beatrice Simmons Memorial Dining Hall. And I really love this line. It's very sweet, just ending for this episode, when Grandpa basically invites everybody into this new dining hall he named in honor of his late girlfriend, and he says, "The dignity's on me."
Sniffle, sniffle.
Exactly. It gets a little dusty in the house around that time. But no, I thought that was cool. It's kind of the theme of the episode in a lot of ways, that there isn't a lot of dignity in the way that these old people have been treated. And Grandpa realizes that that's one way that he can give everyone he knows a little bit of that happiness that he and Beatrice gave to each other.
Yeah, but it's still along the Simpsonian trajectory here, where it is... Like, he does the right thing for good reasons, but it's still a little bit selfish because it's helping his own situation out.
It helps him too, sure.
But I mean, he's old and it's his money, so fuck everybody else.
That's kind of like that Friends episode where I think it's Phoebe and Joey make a bet that it's impossible to do a good deed that isn't at least a little bit selfish, and it makes some really good points, actually. I think, just a lot of times when you do good for other people, it does good for you, even to the point of, if nothing else, you can argue the fact that if you go and do like charity work, it makes you feel good on the inside, and therefore it's also a benefit to yourself.
Yeah. But I mean, that is what it is. It's a valid definition, and there's no reason to try to argue it. I mean, why would you want to do something and feel bad afterwards?
Totally. But yeah, the only other thing I wanted to point out on this episode was it's the only time in Simpsons history that they actually play the credits with the name of the actors and with all of the characters they play. Because at this time they are getting so much fan mail of people asking like who plays what character. And you have to keep in mind, this wasn't in times where like people didn't even have those AOL discs in their homes yet. Like this was pre-internet and there was no IMDb. Yet. Right, exactly. So I thought that was kind of cool. It was really jarring. I immediately noticed it as soon as the credit rolled. I was like, whoa, that looks really weird.
Well, the only thing I really have to point out in this is that I wanted to definitely talk about Dr. Marvin Monroe's phone menu, which my handy guide here pointed out that the number 3 selection on Monroe's phone menu is for people who are having trouble maintaining and then it cut off. Besides that, we touched on everything in here. It also notated Bart staring down the line, which he wasn't supposed to do, which is probably one of the reasons they were stuck there for as long as they were.
It very well could be.
And I just wanted to point out that, like I said earlier about this episode, they put in little hints throughout the entire time about how crappy the retirement home was. And so it was one of those another full circle moments where it takes a while for the point to hit home with the characters, but he ends up putting the money back into something that really needed it, that they were putting right in the background through the entire episode. So I like it when they do that.
I do too, and like a lot of these episodes, in particularly Krusty Gets Busted, as we spoke of course, very fondly. But I like when they actually give you all the information you need during the episode to kind of figure it out, and sometimes it still gets you by surprise.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I think that's going to do it for Old Money. But we still have Brush with Greatness to talk about, which debuted on April 11th, 1991. Chalkboard gag on this one was I will not hide behind the Fifth Amendment, which I laughed my ass off of because I could totally... That's such a Bart Simpson thing.
Yes. I'm going to tell you right now, this has been my favorite chalkboard gag up to this point. Like, I just started laughing hysterically. I've seen all these before, and they just kind of all... Like, I read them every time, but, I'll chuckle every once in a while, but this one made me flat out bust out laughing.
Because it's either this one or I'm Not a 32-Year-old Woman are the two that get me, just because I love the idea that they did that when she was, in fact, a 32-year-old woman. I like both of those. But yeah, this one's fantastic,
it's just,
for sure.
Like you said, it's so Bart Simpson. Like, you could totally see him doing tons of things and using that as his cop-out, basically.
Big time, big time. So, the couch gag here, I want to point out, definitely leads some credibility to our Magical Maggie theories that we've talked about here in the past, in that the couch tips over when all the Simpsons jumps on it, but Maggie just so happens to fall perfectly in the center of being able to watch TV and landing comfortably on a couch cushion.
It's not magic, it's the Force.
I'm going with, from now on, it's Magical Maggie. I'm sorry, Magical Maggie, because, I mean, we can debate between Muggle-born Witch, we can debate between Jedi, but it's all magic.
It's Jedi Master Maggie.
Well, I like Magical Maggie, and, fuck you. So, regardless.
Why can't you say it, then?
Magical Maggie, motherfucker.
Or, you know what the actual issue is? She's probably been exposed to so much nuclear radiation over the time that she's been born that she just has these innate abilities.
Oh my god, dude, wouldn't it be fantastic if on the very last, which I believe there's going to be 669 episodes, if I've read correctly, by the time they get done with the 30th season, which it does seem like that will be the end. Would it not be incredible if on the 669th episode they revealed that Maggie had, like, radiation powers? I would be so thrilled if they went that route.
It would explain a whole lot.
Definitely.
And that's why the whole town is radioactive, and that's why they don't age for some reason.
Yeah, that's another good point. But this episode opens on Krusty the Clown advertising live from Mount Splashmore. And it's been a great week, he says. They've got to, they say that they've basically been doing the show live there for a week, and he's going to miss, more than anything, the H2WOA, which is like their signature slide. I also like that he tells all the kids that they need to make their parents take them because he told Mount Splashmore that they would, and if you don't, you'll make me a liar. and then they do the croon along with Krusty, which is, as Lisa puts it, the most possible shameless promotion they could have done. Bart says it worked on me.
Before that, I like that, like, Bart actually looks at Lisa and he goes, "It has been a great week, hasn't it?" Like, it's already working. It's the advertising's already working on Bart.
Oh, so much. But yeah, it's shameless promotion. Bart says it worked on me, and Lisa agrees. They immediately start doing a classic bit where they just incessantly annoy Homer by asking him over and over and over and over again, "Will you take me to Mount Splashmore?" After a long while, it actually breaks him down, and he asks, if I take you to Mount Splashmore, will you stop bothering me? And they're like, calmly and coolly and collectedly like, "Of course, yes." And so they ask one last time, he says yes, and they are excited to get on their way.
This rivals the "Are we there yet?" thing in my mind, and it's just
big
one
time.
of those where they do it over and over again, but in a Simpsons way, not in a Family Guy way.
Yeah, I hear you exactly, and I agree completely on that. So they're getting ready to go to the water park. Everyone's in the car except Homer, who's struggling to get his smiley face swim trunks on, that by the time he squeezes in, it turns into a frowny face. And Marge says, "Oh, Homer, that doesn't really leave much to the imagination," which kind of sets up our B plot we'll get here to shortly, where Homer's going to be struggling with his weights. They get to the water park. I love one of the rides is like a coaster that just drops people into a lake, and I, wonder how much their insurance must cost.
You see how scared the kids look, or angry the kids looked too when they were coming up from underwater? They were
right.
so mad.
They did, and I have to say I think I would be too. I mean, that would be a really shitty ride.
But you see the ride, like, they're walking around.
Yeah, you should see it, right? Yeah, I agree. I did like that Homer starts talking about how, like, they have to stick together or it'll be really hard to find each other, and, like, within the time that he's able to get that sentence out, everyone's already scattered.
And this is before cell phones, people.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't have cell phones at a water park anyway.
I was going to bring that up as well, but I'm just saying.
Unless you're Magical Maggie.
Exactly.
So, the kids are most excited.
Jedi Master abilities keeps the phone dry all the time.
The kids are excited to get on the H2WO ride, which is their giant, big, huge water slide, and they're excited because it seems like there isn't much of a line, but as soon as they go through the, like, gate, they actually do a bit where it's drawn to resemble Ascending and Descending, which is the famous M.C. Escher painting, or actually it's a lithograph, so it's a pencil drawing of a staircase that's seemingly impossible. And that's exactly what this line is. Impossibly long.
It would be impossibly long unless you are Bart, Lisa, or Homer, who always have a trick or two up their sleeves.
I love this. I've loved this so much when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and I always wanted to use it at a water park or like a theme park, but I never had the balls to do it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of guts to do it.
Mm-hmm. You've really got to sell. And also, I think the fact that it's like the brother-sister team helps to some extent, but I could just be trying to like pad myself so that I don't feel like such a pussy.
But what Mr. Most Days Off is referring to here is Bart gives Lisa the cue to do her bit, and Lisa starts crying, and real tears, crying, "Mommy, Mommy," and Bart starts leading her through the crowd saying, "Excuse us, coming through, finding Mom," and trying to get Lisa back to her mom, basically. And it works so perfectly because it gets them to the front of the line.
Like, instantly. And then, like, there's a quick scene where it shows Marge and Maggie in the kiddie pool, which goes from 1 inches to 2 inches, and Marge is concerned when Maggie ventures into the deep end. But then immediately after that, we get Homer doing the exact same thing, only instead of crying, he's claiming to be the line inspector. I particularly really love the line when one of the elderly members of the line is like, "Oh, God bless that man."
Yeah, that's... just
as if he's doing some wonderful service for the park and for the people.
Stupid Simpson tricks that pays off. I love that Bart has his little boogie board with him the entire time.
Yeah. Did you ever play the game Virtual Bart on the Sega Genesis?
Yes.
Okay, so they had a level from that game, which honestly, the game isn't great. It's still fun. It's about 6 mini games, and it's actually really fucking difficult. Like, I was only ever able to get through a few of them. And this water slide game was basically your Bart sliding down on the boogie board, and you gotta kind of like dodge stuff, kind of tubing style, and there's power-ups to collect. And the thing is, though, every once in a while you have to make a decision to go left or right, and basically you're trying to avoid running into Homer. And just like in this episode here in a moment, Homer is stuck in the slide, and you're trying to avoid hitting him. And in that game I always really liked, but I'll be honest, I have no idea to this day if that was entirely luck-based, or if I was just too stupid to figure out that there was some sort of color combination I was supposed to be figuring out, because the tubes were different colors, and that was really the only thing I could attempt to try to make a pattern with, but I could never figure that game out, and I never beat it. I don't know if it was beatable. That could be the issue. Maybe it was just like kind of like when you get 3 homers, you're done. And, you know, you got to collect as much points as possible before that point. But I always had the impression that, like some of the other games, there was a way to get to the end of the slide, and I never got close. Did you?
No. I put it up there with the stupid battle games in Mario Party where they're only luck-based and there's no skill involved, and you just have to cut the right wire, and there's just...
Cut the rope? I fucking hate that
game.
Mario
Yeah,
Party.
like there's just so many easy ways to be done that it just happens too frequently.
Yeah, and a lot of those were like that, but I particularly remember I was really good at the tomato throwing one, where if you got to the next one, it was eggs. Yeah, I love that one a lot.
Wasn't that the picture day?
Yeah, it sure was.
I love that one, but basically that's GoldenEye before GoldenEye, so take that, N64.
Yeah, that's true. So anyway, Homer gets stuck, as we spoke of, and... This one is kind of sad just because Homer has been really struggling with his weight. But I have to say, he weighs in at 260, and I feel like a water slide should be able to accommodate that. But maybe in 1991, it's a little bit different. I don't know.
But I gotta tell you, like, this would be one of my biggest fears, I would think. Like, I have a terrible fear of drowning, I think, at least. I've never been in a situation... Well, one time that almost happened, but might explain a lot. But getting stuck in a water slide, like, that would scare the shit out of me. I'm sorry, especially with running water behind you. And, like, luckily he can move his head around. But especially when the kids come down to knock him through and they get stuck on top of him. Like, I'd feel like
it's too big to be human. Send a couple kids down to dislodge it.
Which makes no sense, but okay. And in the very next scene when they're pulling the slide apart, the kids are all gone. They're all removed already.
Yeah, they must have crawled back up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've always been really comfortable in the water. I actually, I was on swim team. I teach scuba now. I used to work at a water park. And so I've done a lot of stupid shit in a water park because as lifeguards, we used to just goof off before. We worked at the same water park, but you just, you did the land stuff. And
I was maintenance man. No, we
stuff.
fought down the slide before the workday started. But the slide...
Oh, maybe that's why you're
afraid. The slide
it?
wasn't covered. It was on the white slide, the slow one. But I was kind of worried that we might get pushed off the sides if we pushed each other too hard.
We used to use our lifeguard tubes, like the long, like rubber-looking tube things. They're not rubber; they're like foam, but like the things that we use to like save people.
Yeah.
We used to take those and like we would try to like ride down them like luge style on the white slide, and that was scary as fuck because the white slide was slow if you just went down on your butt,
Yeah.
but when you went down on the tube, you were like rocketing around those corners and like
those turns you go up high. Yeah.
there's a few times where like there was some close calls for sure, especially after that video came out recently where there's another water park in Texas that somebody basically went around the corner too fast and like fell off and that really hurt. And after watching that, I was like, wow, I almost killed myself so many times. But,
Stupid kids.
yeah, I would do it again in a heartbeat. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, Homer's in at 260 and he swears to God that he'll always be hungry again, starting his diet. That's a reference to Gone with the Wind, where as God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again. It's the Homer version, and immediately after he says it, his stomach growls. He does a classic dough and tells his stomach to shut up.
Oh man, and poor Homer, like the first night that he's eating on this stupid diet, it's pork chop night. Like that's you should know that. Like I love food.
Why did I have to start my diet on pork chop night?
I love food, so I would know the next night is pork chop night, and I'd be one of those people that's like, it can wait. That's future Richie's problem.
It's great when he has his rice cake that's only 35 calories, and Marge tells him he can put a little something on it for flavor, and he goes to the microwave and he stacks it like 6 to 8 inches tall of various stuff, and then after he takes it out, he's like, ooh, and only 35 calories.
I like that he said, I've been using that as a coaster.
But in addition to eating healthy, Homer actually also goes up to the attic to get his old athletic gear. And there's actually a quick callback to 2 cars in every garage and 3 eyes on every fish. We actually see a Burns for Governor sticker, which I thought was kind of cool. I just like it when they do the little throwbacks on themselves like that.
Yeah.
We also discover that there's a stack of Ringo Starr paintings in the attic, and they're all done by Marge, and they're actually quite good. Some of them are like Marge are getting married to Ringo, and she assures Homer it was just a schoolgirl crush. Homer's like, yeah, likely story, which I thought was funny, because very clearly she was a schoolgirl at the time that she did them.
And it's not like millions of other people didn't go through the same phase when the Beatles were out.
Right. But yeah, so this actually gets the Simpsons talking about how Marge used to be a painter, and she loved painting until one day, art student in her high school basically told her she was garbage, and at the same time, she sent the painting she did of Ringo to Ringo and never heard anything back, so she quit art and never went back to it. Lisa encourages her to go to community college. She decides that's a great idea, runs it by Homer. Homer wants to make sure that he doesn't have to do anything, and when he's told no, he says, oh yes, that's a wonderful idea, do that.
I love the sign that Lisa and Marge see when they're walking up to the community college where it says, where old dogs learn new tricks.
Yeah. So Marge is going to art school. Homer is trying to get in better shape. There's a kind of a Rocky montage, only it's very a Homer version. I love when he's lifting the bar of weights, and one by one they start falling off the end until he lifts the bar.
45 pounds, baby.
Marge actually wins an art contest from her new teacher. Really encourages her and is a really good guy. And he's voiced by one of the great guest voice stars on this show as well.
Yes.
John Lovitz. He was formerly Marge's love interest in high school, Artie Ziff, but will later become the critic, which is so good he actually gets his own spinoff.
Well, and there's also the one episode where he is the theater teacher when they do Streetcar Named Desire. Like he pops up over and over again, and I think the show The Critic starts before the crossover episode, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I thought that it was a crossover that stemmed from The Simpsons.
Well, I remember watching The Critic for at least a season, or how it wasn't on that long. But I remember I knew who The Critic was before he appeared on The Simpsons because they marketed it that way, if I remember correctly. But I think
weird.
That's a great
misremembering.
episode too, though. When he badmouths MacGyver and someone Patty hang him from the gutter, and Bart comes by and says, "Uh-oh, you badmouth MacGyver."
That's good stuff. So, at the same time, Mr. Burns is struggling to find an artist that will paint him in a likeness that he enjoys, that he just fired another, or actually an artist quit, and he's basically being told by Smithers, you only have 6 days till your wing in this art museum opens, and you need something to submit. You've run out of artists in town. The only person left is Marge Simpson, who just won this contest, and her husband's an employee, so she'll be easy to manipulate, basically, to pressure.
What I liked is the little tidbit right before the scene in Burns' office. First of all, it's where they're in the break room and Carl's talking to the donut guy and Carl's voice is off again. It's not Carl's actual voice, but I love the little moment when you hear the donut salesman, or Carl says, Homer Simpson just went on a diet, and the donut guy goes, oh my god, and I just bought a boat.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really good. We get one of those scenes that you really enjoy next where Burns actually knocks on the Simpsons' door, but he can barely lift the knocker. And he starts immediately griping that, what, do these people not answer their door when they hear a knock? And Smithers actually ends up having to knock for them.
This is the third or fourth time in the show's history already that Burns is making an appearance in the Simpsons' home. Like, I didn't realize how much he's over there until this episode, and I just thought, man, you'd think he'd be really familiar with the area by now.
You're right, because he goes for the dinner with the three-eyed fish. He goes for the boxing match in Homer vs. Lisa. Yeah, there's a couple of appearances there. That's
and I wanted
to
ask you something real quick, because I thought maybe you saw this when you were researching the episode. In the previous scene where the art teacher, John Lovitz, picks Marge to be the person he wants to showcase, and he shows them how to draw that rabbit. Is that like he's explaining how you can see regular people and then make shapes out of them to draw the shapes to make the actual picture? And his hand covers it while he does it, but he basically explains how to draw a rabbit. And I didn't know if that was Matt Groening's way of throwing in, like, this is how I did From Hell back in the day, or I didn't know if anything popped up about it, but it seemed like they're throwing a joke in there about that to me.
I did not see anything on that, no. Man, it's a shame you don't have Google. So, Burns commissions Marge to draw him, and Homer is really worried about this. He gets home and sees Burns in his home, and he's like, oh, my personal life and my work life combining, how wonderful. Marge, could I please talk to you in the kitchen real quick? And I really enjoy that he's just, very concerned about Burns being in his home, which, if your boss is in your home, I mean, when we used to work at the jewelry store, I would have not wanted our boss in our home. That's for damn sure. Not the one that you were fucking, but the other one.
I don't know what you're talking about. But I liked when Homer first walked in the door and he says, honey, I'm home, and Burns says, oh, there's an original sentiment. Like, there's so many good Burns lines in this one.
There's a ton, you're right. My favorite is actually a little bit later. Marge is noticing how awful Burns is and really struggling to find his inner beauty. And in particularly the way he treats Smithers. And right after Smithers talks about how, like, oh no, he's not just my employer, he's also my best friend. I wake him up in the morning and I tuck him in at night. And right after that, he brings Burns coffee and he says, Smithers, this is too hot, and throws it on him. And he's like, oh, you're so right, sir. It's scalding me as we speak.
Such a pushover.
It's awful. So right after this, Marge actually catches a glimpse of Burns changing all up in that buff, like nothing, like old man wiener hanging out. And he's mortified, telling her to get away, and they have a spot where Smithers is like, would you like me to leave too, sir? And he's like, oh no, don't be silly, Smithers, you're like a doctor.
Oh, that's awful. Has Maggie grabbed him by the legs yet? Because I wanted to bring that up too with our Maggie talk.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. No, Maggie, at one point, Burns is like, what the hell is this on me? And he's kicking the baby off of him. And one of the many times that Marge notices that it's hard to discover his inner beauty while he's being a dick.
So you're saying that Maggie Jedi snuck up to Burns because she knows he's part of the dark side, and she was latching onto him to take away the dark.
No, I'm not saying that at all. You are crazy at this point, but I still love you, buddy.
Well, I mean, nobody in Hogwarts would go up and try to take away Voldemort.
Well, she wasn't trying to take anyway away.
She was hugging on for dear life on his leg.
Well, I mean, if you were being shook off of something, I would be holding on too.
She had to grab it first.
All right.
And how did she get there without anybody seeing?
Again, Marge is having just a real hard time discovering Burton's inner beauty. I like that there's a line when Lisa was practicing her sax, and Burns was, like, yelling at her to knock off that racket, and Marge literally says, like, Mr. Burns, it's really hard to see your inner beauty when you're yelling at an 8-year-old girl. And this is the next part is where Marge just loses it. Homer comes downstairs super proud that he is back to 239 pounds, which is actually really good considering where he started the episode. He's lost a lot of weight and he's really proud of himself. He's 239 and feeling fine. And Mr. Burns mocks him and is like, "Oh my God, you're actually happy with your appearance? You're the fattest thing I've ever seen, and I've been on a safari." And Marge loses her shit. She is done. She wants him out of their house. She can finish this painting without him. She tears up what she's already started. And it seems like she is not really going to be able to submit anything flattering about Mr. Burns. And right then, she receives a letter from none other than Ringo Starr, which it got to Ringo, and he answered it, and he actually really loved her painting. Like, that was, it was just that he was so backlogged on fan mail that it took a while to get to it. Which I wanted to point out, actually, kind of interestingly, that in October 2008, Ringo in real life sent out a video saying that at the end of the month, or I think it was like October 20th, at that point, any and all fan mail was going to be deleted, like just discarded, because he was just receiving too much of it. He was never going to be able to get through it. So if like you hadn't sent something, he wasn't going to get to it. And he never referenced this Simpsons episode, but a lot of media outlets when they reported this did. So it was very, very similar to what happened to him in this, where he was just so far behind. It took him 20 years to get back to Marge.
But that speaks volumes about the fact that he actually wants to respond to all of it, though.
Totally. There was actually another funny bit with Ringo in particular. They were all really excited to have Ringo Starr on because, I mean, he's a Beatle. All the Simpsons people were, he's a Beatle and whatnot. And they actually, when Ringo was first going to be on the show, he was only going to have one line, and he himself asked if they could expand it, and they were, of course, immediately happy to oblige to that. But there was a list of rules that went about with Ringo that you, like, just a couple, for instances, like, they didn't want people touching him, they didn't want people approaching him at random, they didn't want... they didn't want people asking for autographs. He was there to work, but he didn't want to be harassed. Unfortunately, the writer of this show, who previous to this episode had actually just been an editor, both visual editor and audio editor, but had not written an episode, this was his first one, he did not get the memo. And immediately upon Ringo Starr's arrival, he's a big Beatles fan, Brian K. Roberts just goes right up to Ringo and asks him to autograph the script. And it was kind of, it's laughed off, but it's just funny because they were explicitly told not to do that. And, like, before he even got out of the car, there was already somebody, like, breaking the rules.
Well, it's not like you can send a mass email out at this time, giving everybody a list of things to do and not do.
True. Yeah, it's got to be the old school way of getting memos.
Of sending somebody around to tell everybody, and they forget this guy was out at lunch at the time and missed it.
But Ringo sends Marge a reply. It's a very positive message saying how much she enjoyed her painting, and she, he was really appreciative of her writing and all that good stuff. And it kind of inspired Marge, and she got a gleam in her eye, and she started working on a new project, and she worked through the night. And the following day, it's the big opening of the Burns wing. There's another great moment where Burns isn't strong enough to pull the veil to unveil his own painting, so Smithers has to come in and help.
I like what Burns says before the unveiling, where he says, "A wing commemorated by the man who ponied up the dough."
Yeah. And commemorated he was, in all of his glory. Marge painted him in the nude. And the immediate reaction was bad. No one liked it. But Marge stood up and defended it. And she talked about how she wanted to show that under all of the bad qualities of Burns, there's a feeble old man down there that perhaps isn't long for this world. And people started to turn around on it just a little bit. There is one in particular line by Lisa's teacher. I'm blanking.
John Lovitz?
No, Lisa's teacher, the elementary school teacher.
Oh my gosh.
Not Krabappel.
Yeah, I know. It's oh my god, this is gonna kill me. Hoover, Mrs. Hoover, right?
Thank you. Miss Hoover says he's bad, but he'll die. So I like it. And I thought that was really great. Mr. Burns goes up to Marge himself and says, "I'm no art critic, but I know what I hate. And I don't hate this." Which is about as nice as a thing that you're going to get out of Burns.
I like the line, the last line of this episode made me laugh a lot.
Oh, of course, of course.
It's where Burns said, "And thanks for not making fun of my genitalia." And Marge says, "I
thought I was." Yeah, that was fantastic. Rich, was there anything else that you or that book of yours would like to say about Brush with Greatness?
My book does notate that some of the paintings in the dung heap from Mr. Burns' house, they have hung on Mr. Burns' office walls in previous episodes. I thought that was a pretty cool little tie-in there.
Oh, it is pretty cool.
Yeah, and then the signs at Mount Splashmore, they're real quick at the beginning, but one says, "This park is not copless, so please don't go topless." And the other sign is a sign of Neptune, and it says, "Caution, you will get wet." But I like we are not copless, so don't go topless. It's a clever rhyme.
Yeah, that was I like all the little signs that are hidden off a lot of time in the background. Those are usually pretty good. One other thing I wanted to point out. Well, first of all, I mentioned a Batman reference earlier, and I forgot to mention it. It's during them interviewing Krusty the Clown about the mishap of Homer getting stuck in the water slide at his sponsored park, Mount Splashmore. There's a scene with him on camera, and he's actually removing his clown makeup in the exact same way that Jack Nicholson does in 1989's Batman as the Joker. So again, I thought it was interesting that we had 2 Joker references in these 2 episodes.
See, I didn't catch that. I've always noticed that he cleans off his face, but I never realized that it was a reference towards Batman.
I had to read it, but that's a direct reference to the movie Batman.
I totally see it now.
Drawn in the exact same way. Yeah, after I read it, I was like, oh, I get that. Yeah, totally. I also wanted to talk about that last joke, the word genitalia, spoken by Mr. Burns at the end of the show. It came with a lot of controversy. The network did not like it, and what ended up having to happen is Sam Simon, co-creator of The Simpsons, actually had to agree with the network that he would personally write every single person who wrote a complaint basically he would individually write every person who was offended and actually complained to Fox. Now, unfortunately, I did look and I could not find any information on if he actually had to send any apologies or not, but the contention of this joke being through was him agreeing to personally apologize to anyone who complained.
Okay, yeah, it's like if I'm a writer on the show, then I go, oh, okay.
I just thought that was a cool bit.
I think that's cool, but like on the Simpsons side, that's an easy out, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, at most, you're not going to have that many people complain. I'm sure it would be annoying to have to like personally write people, but still.
It would be, but I'm just saying, like, Fox is known for being right-wing, uppity, like you can't get away with shit on television a lot of the times, especially back then. Which still boggles me that they've had The Simpsons the entire time.
Yeah, their animation and entertainment shows are far different than their news and politics. That's absolutely the truth.
Yeah, exactly. But just, I mean, for me, just person of The Simpsons, that's an easy out, and you have to take it.
All right, man. I think that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Is there anything that you'd like to plug before we get out of here, Rich?
As always, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at thewiz_kid23. Also, go ahead and follow our show Twitter account. It's at bestdarndiddly. That's DIDDLY for Diddly. So you Oakley Dokley do that for us, okay?
Oakley Dokley. I'm at MrMostDaysOff on Twitter. Also, get on iTunes and do us a solid. Go to the Fans Podcast page on iTunes and write a 5-star review. And mention the Best Darn Diddly Review Show by name. That part's important. If you write a review and mention us by name, I will read your review on the air and give you a shout out for that. Also, for you wrestling fans, head over to voicesofwrestling.com where I do a weekly breakdown of Lucha Underground with Chris Novembrino. And as always, we look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be back with 2 more episodes. And actually a special guest, my wife Emily, will be back to talk about Lisa's Substitute, where Lisa gets a crush on her teacher, and the War of the Simpsons, where Homer has to decide between fishing and marriage counseling. We look forward to it, and we'll see you next week.
2 more perfect episodes for the missus.